Hey, I'm Shane, and for the last few weeks, we've been talking about comebacks. Whether you think of the New England Patriots coming back when down 28-3 in the Super Bowl, or maybe you think of clutching a victory royale in Fortnite when your whole squad got eliminated except for you. Look, the feeling of going from hopeless to winning it all is really special, isn't it? Well, today we're gonna talk about the ultimate comeback story, one that's way bigger than video games or sports. We're talking about Easter. And let me assure you, it is the greatest comeback story ever. It's the story of Jesus, the one person who did something so unexpected that people have been talking about it for like 2,000 years at this point. In fact, his comeback has quite literally changed the world. And just maybe, it'll change your world too. Okay, so last week, we discussed how Jesus was all about love. This week, we get to see just how far Jesus' love for us went. We'll read about the ultimate act of love, which would lead to the greatest comeback in history. But first, let's talk about what some of us might be thinking. I just want to name it, right? Like, why should it change our world specifically? Like, why does any of this Jesus stuff matter to us? I mean, Easter happens every year, doesn't it? Many people know that it's connected to Jesus, but why should we care about this? I mean, maybe you have questions like, is this Jesus stuff actually true? And if Jesus was such a big deal, why don't I see more evidence of him in my everyday life? Or how could something that happened 2,000 years ago matter to me today? Or maybe you even think that what Jesus did matters for your life, but it matters after you die. But you don't really know what it means for you, well, like now, while you're living. Look, these are all really fair thoughts and questions. If Jesus was just some random guy who lived a really long time ago, it would be easy to think that he didn't matter all that much. But as you can probably already guess, Jesus wasn't just some random guy. I mean, think about this. Over the last 2,000 years, billions of people have cared about who Jesus is. In fact, billions are still part of his movement even today. The Bible, where we learn a lot about Jesus, is the best-selling book of all time. And even if you're not sure what you think about him, you probably hear Jesus mentioned in movies, music, social media, and all sorts of other things. So clearly, Jesus is kind of a big deal. But why is that? Like, what makes him so special? Well, Jesus did pull off the greatest comeback of all time. And when he did, it changed everything. To understand why Easter is so important, we need to look at the days leading up to it. It's a story with more twists and turns than even like your favorite movie. See, Jesus had been traveling around, teaching about God's love, he was healing people, and he was even saying some really game-changing things that challenged people's ideas about stuff like religion and society as a whole. When he rode into the big city near where he lived, the city called Jerusalem, people went wild. But not everyone was a fan. Some of the powerful religious and political leaders felt that Jesus was a threat. They worried about losing their own influence and even getting in trouble with Rome, which was the ruling empire that was in charge at the time. So they decided to get rid of him. Let me show you how this whole thing worked. One by one, a series of dominoes fell next. One of Jesus' friends betrayed him. He was arrested at night and he was put through unfair trials all night long and into the morning. Even though he was innocent, the authorities gave in to pressure and sentenced Jesus to death by crucifixion. It was a horrible way to die that was reserved for the worst criminals. Then on Friday, Jesus was actually nailed to a cross. He was crucified. Then his followers lost their teacher, their friend, their hopes, and even their dreams. They thought Jesus was going to change the world, but now he was gone. I mean, this feels like game over, right? Look, it may have felt that way to a lot of Jesus followers. After all, some people thought he was the Messiah, the one who God would send to save them from the corrupt government. Some believe he was actually God's son. But after Jesus' death, his followers may have wondered if he really was who he said he was. After all, could God's son be killed? The disciples, who were Jesus' closest friends and followers, they actually went into hiding, and at that point, all hope seemed gone. But remember, this wasn't the end of the story. See, on Sunday morning, one of Jesus' followers, Mary Magdalene, was at his tomb, and something incredible happened. Let's read what John wrote about in this moment. And John, just to note, was one of the best friends of Jesus. He recorded what happened next this way. Early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. She said, "They have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Okay, so imagine Mary's shock and confusion. She went to mourn her friend, and instead she found an empty tomb. Her first thought probably wasn't, "Oh, he's alive." But instead, she had to be thinking, someone took him. And later, Mary went back to the tomb and saw two angels. Yeah, this story is incredible. They asked her why she was crying, and she explained that she had thought people had taken Jesus away. But then something wilder than even seeing angels happened, if you can believe that. She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus. But she didn't recognize him. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" Jesus asked her. "Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. "Sir," she said, "if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go and get him." "Mary," Jesus said. She turned to him and cried out, "Rabboni," which is Hebrew for teacher. Okay, can we just stop for a second? This moment changed everything. Jesus was alive. And not only was he alive, but he appeared first to a woman, Mary Magdalene. I mean, this was a really big deal at the time because their culture placed little value and importance on women. Jesus appearing to Mary showed that he valued everyone equally, no matter who they were. He broke the cultural boundaries and trusted Mary to share this incredible news that he had risen from the dead. Look, this is a part of a long list of just incredible things that Jesus did and taught about. When Jesus came back to life, he made his comeback and everything changed. Jesus rose from the dead. And in doing so, he validated everything he ever said or did. He really was who he said he was, God's son, the one everyone was waiting for. He proved that when he came back to life. His resurrection, it actually proved that his love for all people was real. That forgiveness is possible, that God's kingdom is here, and that we can have real hope. His teachings were worth following because he even had power over death. Talk about a comeback. Jesus' death was not an accident, and it definitely wasn't a surprise. Jesus died on purpose to show people what sacrificial love looked like, to show that God would stop at nothing to have a relationship with us. Jesus' death and resurrection show that he is worth trusting and that we can experience our own comebacks through following him. When they thought it was all over, Jesus proved exactly who he was. Okay, now let's go back to the beginning of this series for a second. We looked at this story where Jesus showed up to two sisters, Mary and Martha, after their brother had died. Jesus told Martha, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying." And now Jesus proved that all of that was true. He didn't just talk about this. He didn't just talk the talk, he lived it. He actually walked the walk, literally, right out of the tomb. This is why we can say Jesus' comeback backs up everything he said. Everything Jesus said about who he was proven true when he came back to life. Jesus wasn't just a good teacher or a nice guy, although he was both of those things. He was exactly who he said he was, the Son of God who couldn't even be stopped by death itself. His resurrection proves that having a close relationship with God that starts now and lasts forever is actually possible. Jesus is truly the ultimate comeback kid. But what does that mean for us today? How does Jesus' epic comeback affect our lives right now? Well, it means that we have a choice to make. If Jesus really did come back to life, if everything he said is actually true, then we need to decide how we'll respond to all of that. So here's a few ways that we can live like this is true and follow the way or the example of Jesus. The first one is trust Jesus with your everyday life. Look, if Jesus has power over death, he certainly has the power to help you with whatever you're going through. Whether that's being worried about a test or worried about your family's future, you can talk to Jesus about it. He's alive and he cares about every part of your life. So if you've already made the decision to trust Jesus, I encourage you to keep taking steps that make that relationship stronger. Or if you haven't decided to trust Jesus, but you want to, your small group is a great place to talk about that more today. And if you haven't figured out exactly what you think, my challenge to you is to learn more. As you get to know who Jesus is, you might just discover that trusting him will change your life in incredible ways. Okay, the next step you can take is to live with hope. Even when things look bad, remember that Jesus came back from the dead. That means that no situation is hopeless. You might be going through a tough time, but it's not the end of your story. Just like Jesus had his comeback, you can have yours too. And then finally, treat others with love. Look, Jesus showed incredible love by dying for us and then coming back to offer us full life and really a totally new way of living our lives. A way of living that loves others in the same way that he loved us. One that's full of hope and of joy. A new way of living in community with people who care for one another. I mean, this can look all sorts of ways. This can look like sitting with a new kid at school or speaking kindly even to people who are mean. It could even look like being willing to listen to people that we disagree with. Following Jesus is a journey. It is. That's just the truth. It's about taking small steps every day to live more like him. You might mess up. I know I do all the time. But the good news is his love and forgiveness are always there. That's the power of his comeback. It also gives us the chance for a comeback too. So here we are. It's Easter. It's more than just how we dress up and celebrate. It's about the greatest comeback story ever told. Jesus, who died on the cross, didn't stay dead. And that proved that everything he did and said while alive was true. Jesus' comeback backs up everything he said. And the best part, this comeback story is an invitation for all of us. It's an invitation to a new life, a fresh start, a chance to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. Now, as we wrap up, I want you to consider this. What if Jesus' comeback story could be your comeback story too? What if you could have a fresh start? Because that's exactly what Jesus offers. Jesus' comeback backs up everything he said, and that changes everything for us. Okay, when you head to groups, I want you to think about your answer to this question. What does Jesus' comeback mean for your own life?